Over the past year throughout the United States, COVID-19 has taken the lives of more than 500,000 people and saddled many others with economic hardship. But the experience of the pandemic also goes far beyond the staggering metrics to changes in everything from social fabric to personal psyche. It's all part of what's being revisited tonight in the retrospective programming on different platforms by GBH News. It's called A Year Apart: How COVID Changed Us. To tell us what's planned is GBH's General Manager for News, Pam Johnston. Thank you very much for being with us, Pam.
Thanks for having me, Chris. I'm glad to be here.
And Pam, there's a reason for doing this tonight because March 10th is a significant date. Maybe it's not universal throughout the United States, but I think most of us look back as some sort of an ominous beginning to this experience. Why is that so important?
The 10th was the day that the governor called a state of emergency here in Massachusetts. So although there's a lot of retrospectives happening this week, whether it be the World Health Organization or the CDC, for those of us here living in Massachusetts, the 10th stands out as the day that everything changed.
Now, when you're doing this show tonight, this is not just about how many people died or got infected or got their vaccinations already. You're looking for something else. What do you hope to come out of this?
This year, this year has so many layers and so many stories in which we have told and we continue to tell, whether it have to do with, of course, the mind-boggling impact on the lives lost, but also the economic divide, the racial divide, what's happened to schooling and children who are working remotely, the inequities that are laid bare by this pandemic, the impact that it's having on women and moms in particular, so many stories. So we wanted truly to dedicate an entire day of programming across all of our news platforms and all of our shows to dig deeply into as much as we could, because what gets lost a year later is the numbers. What we talk about, the numbers, we talk about today's developments every single day. And what we were hoping to do today is really pause and look back at all the different ways this pandemic has touched and changed our lives, and also kind of think about what that might mean going forward.
Well, I know you're asking for viewers or listeners to maybe call in or send an email. Why is that important?
We've spent a year, all of us have spent a year covering that pandemic and certainly talking to folks affected in various ways. But we have all, every single one of us, the journalists, those of us in the newsroom, and those of us experiencing it, have changed. And we really want to have a dialogue with our audience, not so much about the stories that we've seen and those that we've selected in our newsroom, but we want to hear from you. And we want to infuse your thoughts and your experiences into our journalism, into our reporting. We at GBH are so proud to work in public media and really believe that not only our mission, but what defines us is our ability to be part of the community and represent the community. So adding that layer of community involvement and retrospective, I think, is also what sets this day of programming apart. It really is about us and collectively how we are looking back at this year.
I did hear one example of audience contribution was a caller who said that when she looked back, the one thing that she felt the worst about maybe was that she just had no downtime to sort of unwind even briefly the way we used to do it normally. Now, this is something that might be hard to tell your family members who say, stop whining, but the importance of being able to call in to GBH and says, look, this is affecting us.
Absolutely. And just a way to share your story and add it to what has turned out to be a tapestry of stories. And I think we all, I've heard this with friends, with relatives, with my colleagues in the newsroom, you feel as though the way your life has been impacted and your small, if you're lucky enough to survive it and to work from home and to kind of be able to navigate your life, you feel pretty terrible complaining about it, but it's all perspective. So to open the door and to recognize that there is a vast amount of different ways in which it's impacting us, but yours matters too, whether it be just not being able to end the day or escape from your family, or something much more grievous, that matters. That's a real impact, and it has consequences.
Well, you also have some reporters who are looking at how the pandemic has affected certain parts of the world where we used to go outside and spend a lot of time together, whether
Yeah.
it's in education, healthcare, some of the businesses. What have you got planned?
Well, the work of journalism has certainly been impacted by the coronavirus, as you know, just getting out there and talking to people and having close access. Journalism is a very intimate profession where you get up close and you talk to people. So we've had to figure out new ways in which to tell big stories and still have that intimacy. We're all kind of like learning how to talk to each other and build relationships through screens. So certainly on one hand, that has changed our work, but also probably made our journalism, I would even say, more accessible, because we almost can get in touch with anyone these days. Everybody kind of can can join us at a time that is perhaps more convenient before, when we used to have to perhaps meet people in a park or go to a studio, and it's much easier to kind of find folks and have an available time to talk because we can do it right here on Zoom. So that has certainly changed us and the way in which we do our job. And also just, we've all learned, I think there are silver linings, certainly, that we want to touch upon as well. And learning how to recreate ourselves has been a big theme within the stories that we've told this year. From the schoolroom to the boardroom, folks are figuring out new ways to build new muscles in order to go on and be resilient and figure out new ways of navigating. That's a big theme that has come out in the stories that you'll hear on our air today and tonight. It's about kind of not only the sadness and the loss and the desperation, but also the creativity and the triumphs and the resilience from so many, as we learn to navigate in a world that we never thought we could before.
Well, speaking of resilience, I think you're going to be taking a very close look at Black businesses and the things that they had to contend with, but also the things that they managed to pull off. Isn't that right?
Absolutely, yes. So certainly this year has so many lessons learned, and such a racial awakening about the systemic racism that exists in our culture across all kinds of avenues. And so we've taken a special look at the Black experience at GBH. Our wonderful public affairs show, Basic Black, hosted by Callie Crossley on Friday nights, the show has been around for 50 years and constantly throughout all of that time been talking about the Black experience. But wow, that show has never been more relevant or thoughtful or, quite frankly, interesting to a wider audience than it is today. So it's been a great opportunity for not only the folks that work on Basic Black, but at WGBH in general and within our journalism, to take a look at the Black experience and how it particularly is being affected by the coronavirus. Black businesses have, and specifically restaurants, have been hit doubly hard. Right, so we already know that the restaurant business has been decimated over this year, completely crushed. And then add on to the fact that there are so few Black-owned businesses in Massachusetts and in Boston, how these folks can come together to hold each other up and tell a story about the necessity and the strength of and the vibrancy, quite frankly, of these restaurants and the community that keeps them alive and apart, and what sets them apart, and just shine the light on the fact that they exist is something we've been pleased to be able to do.
Well, one form of dislocation that's been, I think, experienced by many news people in this pandemic is that they're not as much the center of the storytelling as they would be normally. That sounds like a problem, but I think you've almost turned it into a virtue at GBH in some of your reporting on what high school students have been going through. What did you learn from that?
Yeah, we've done a really remarkable and special project that we're so proud of this year, called COVID in the Classroom. And when we learned really early on, I'd say it was practically a year ago, when exactly a year ago, when we realized, like, life as we knew it would probably not be getting back to normal anytime soon. we all became very hyper-focused on what was going to happen in the next school year. And in our newsroom, we knew that that would be a story we'd be coming back to all year long. So rather than just telling that story in a different way every day, as is the traditional way, we decided to do something completely new, and certainly new for our newsroom, which we decided to do a year-long, multi-platform deep dive into the experience of schooling this year through the lens of three central characters, three high school seniors from their first day of school, senior year. We're tracking them all the way until their graduation day. And through these three characters who we track on air, online, and on television, we are telling the story of what it is to be a student today and navigate this world and your senior year and all the highs and lows that come with that through under the threat of a pandemic, which allowed us to get deep into this story in a way we never would have been able to before. And it also allowed our audience to kind of see the world through the eyes of students who they could also track. So it's iterative reporting, but also kind of like a long and interesting documentary in the making. It has been a really extraordinary project. We're so proud of it.
Well, finally, Pam, we should mention that if people want to see this tonight or even catch it in some form later, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, please come visit our website, gbhnews.org. A year apart is what we're calling our programming, a year apart, how COVID changed us. There's a beautiful landing page which has an entire schedule. You could also, of course, check us out on our GBH News Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. You can find us all there. And we look forward to having you experience and share your story.
Great. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us.
Chris, thanks so much for having me.
Pam Johnston from GBH. We'll have more news in just a moment.